want to just give your rundown or your take on RDR, what it means for financial advisors?
Yes, I think for those advisors who used to take commission, I think it's caused significant issues if they did not have a client bank which allowed them to transfer to a fee model easily. So for those who are able to do it, really this is the best way forward. There's no doubt about that. For the better qualified, the better the IFAs with the better client banks, this has been a godsend. Let's not pretend that it wasn't. It's been wonderful. The problem is that it loses a lot of clients, and there are some clients who just simply don't have the money at the time they need the advice. If you are wealthy, you don't need the government. Indeed, you spend your whole life trying to avoid the government. You know, you're saving to get away from the government. If you are on medium incomes, the government's part of your world. You're stuck with it whether you like it or not. And so we, even through the commission system, offered a bit of independence from government. What worries me is there's going to be millions of people now who can't afford to pay cash for advice, but will not get advice from anywhere else. We're not seeing at the moment anyone filling the hole. Now, maybe in 10 years' time it will be, but I think there's going to be at least one generation that sort of misses out. And that's quite worrying, and if we could do anything about it, I think we should.
Absolutely, I would certainly hope so as well. Now, there was a lot of discussion about the relationship between the client and the advisor.
Sure.
Firstly, within this area, what are the good components of this relationship between the client and advisor in an ideal setting? And then separately, how do regulations affect that?
Well, you want the client needs to trust you. I always found that the best thing was to try and educate the client before you tried to find out even what they wanted, so they could actually understand sort of what they were being asked. As if you ask someone who doesn't know anything a question, they're not likely to give you an answer that makes any sense. So we, in a previous incarnation, we were sending out literally millions of little booklets explaining what a mortgage was, what a pension was, this sort of thing, in really basic language, no sales pitch, just generic stuff. That's not in the market anymore, and it's needed. So you can then go to your client and say, well, now you've read a bit about mortgages, so they actually understand some of the terminology. They're not going to be an expert, they don't expect or need to be, but they might be able to ask a few intelligent questions. And this is where I think we've got to go. For the top end of the market, there's no problem. The fill bidding end of the market, they got no trouble. They never did have. But actually the ones who really need it, who are the middle management and eventually even the people further down the salary scale than that, they're beginning to be thrown back to government. And government, I think, is completely untrustworthy. Whatever an advisor may be untrustworthy, government can really do it properly. So I think you've got to be very careful that the baby doesn't go out with the bathwater. And I think that's exactly what we've done with the UK. We could have got to where we need to be and done it in a more careful way. So we ended up with not losing the advisors and not losing the clients the advice.
It's amazing how much that baby in bathwater concept goes when it comes to these issues.
Yes.
The final one is, again, about CIFA. What is the role of an organization like CIFA in helping to address some of this?
If it's well run, I think CIFA is well run. It's really important to have an international view of these things. As I said in my contribution, the regulators will go for the weak spot. So whichever country is actually not being well represented, they will tend to bring in regulation, and if they're not being challenged as to the quality and the quantity of that regulation, then they tend to set an example, and then others wish to follow. So it's important that the CIFAs of this world bring the knowledge of the world together and actually bring it to regulators and speak for the people in the whole industry, which that's an important thing to do too. So we've all got to work together because regulation is becoming more and more. At one point, regulation was a very small part of business. Now it's a huge part of business. And in the end, if we don't watch it, it will become business. And then we will all be a lot poorer.